I can prove with these dominoes that God exists.
You can prove nothing!
Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Plink. I respond to various theological and ideological questions and claims from a rationalistic and naturalistic approach in an effort to give and explain the opposite viewpoint and help to balance the conversation. Today, we're looking at a video from a fellow named Jeremy Kundert, who's going to be attempting to prove God exists from an engineering standpoint. And in the description of the video, he simply put, "Atheism is dead."
Oh, well, excuse me, all the hell.
I've been a counter-apologist for a few years now. I've been an atheist for about a decade, and I've been searching for decent reasons to believe in a God for longer than that. And I stopped encountering different or unique arguments for God that I haven't heard before, well, several years ago. Every argument in favor of the existence of a God that I come across these days just ends up being a derivative of an already established and long since debunked apologetic argument. Apologists think that they can just slap a new coat of paint on a tired and worn-out line of theistic reasoning, and we won't realize that it's just the same flotsam that we've heard so many times before. But the thumbnail for this video seems to promise us that this argument for the existence of God is going to be approaching the topic from an engineering standpoint. Now, full disclosure, I'm not an engineer. Nor do I have any qualifications in any of the STEM fields. I'm a communications and journalism professor. But Jeremy's approaching this argument using colored blocks, so I doubt this is going to get into complex science argumentation or jargon that one would need an engineering degree in order to understand. And I had a childhood fraught with many a colored block, so I imagine this will be something easily digestible for all ages. So let's dive in and check out this engineering argument for God that's supposedly going to kill atheism and make me a believer right here, right now. But before we get to that, if you end up liking what you see in this video and would like to help out the channel, make sure to subscribe and click the bell so you'll always be notified when new content comes out. Check out my social media, including my Patreon and Twitter and Blue Sky, all linked in the description. And of course, like this video, pop in a comment. All that goes a long way towards pleasing the YouTube algorithm, facing facts freely for fostering formidable futures far from fabricated fables, finding fulfillment by fundamentally following factual frameworks, forging forward fearlessly, foregoing faith, and facilitating flexible, fluid, flourishing futures for all. May keep my channel motoring along. Now on to today's video.
I can prove with these dominoes that God exists, and then you tell me if atheism is dead. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need just one scientific principle to prove that God exists. This little domino system is at rest. Nothing's moving, nothing's changing. It is in equilibrium, and it will stay in equilibrium forever, unless an outside being acts upon it.
Well, Jeremy, nothing you just said is true. For starters, nothing is ever actually motionless. The blocks themselves are actually always moving. At the atomic level, for instance, atoms in a solid are arranged in a fixed, structured pattern that give the object its shape. However, those atoms vibrate or oscillate about their equilibrium positions. This vibration is a back and forth movement around a central point without changing positions relative to their neighbors. So those blocks are in constant internal motion. But there's also constant external motion. There's no such thing as absolute stillness in the universe. If you mean absolutely in the sense of completely still, then no. The celebrated uncertainty principle of quantum mechanics shows that the more precisely we try to pin down the exact location of anything to tell if it's stationary, the more it jitters about. Every celestial body is in constant motion. The entire universe is expanding and everything is moving away from everything else. So there's just no such thing as actually motionless. There's only relative motionlessness. Those blocks don't seem to be moving in relation to you, or to the table, or any other specific reference point of view. But that doesn't mean that they're actually motionless. And that actually really matters to the point that I can already tell you're about to make. Because your argument is going to depend on absolute, complete motionlessness in order for you to make your case. But go ahead and try to make it.
Now what happens if I apply a little force right here? A little force, a little nudge was applied, and the system released potential energy. And now it is back at equilibrium. And it will stay at equilibrium forever until I re-energize the system.
The only reason the system stopped the motion that you enacted was because of resistant forces. The blocks fell over, aided in their motion by the force of gravity. But when they hit the table, and the table pushed back against their motion, that kinetic energy dissipated. If there hadn't been a table, they would have continued falling to the floor. If there hadn't been a floor to resist the movement, then they would have continued to fall until they hit the dirt of the ground below the floor. If there had been no ground and nothing to push back against the fall all the way to the center of the earth, then the blocks would have fallen to the center of the earth. And their movement wouldn't have stopped there either. With no competing force to slow down or halt their movement, and if the gravity of the planet stopped acting on them to pull them back, the block's inertia and momentum would send them flying through space indefinitely, until some force at some point halted their movement. So it's not like everything that's moving is just naturally and for no apparent reason slowing down or stopping and reaching a state of equilibrium. For instance, the universe is not only expanding, but the expansion is accelerating. The resulting movement of everything within the universe away from each other is also accelerating, which we know through Hubble's law. So it's very difficult to compare something like the universe to a set of colored blocks on a table. Which I know you haven't actually made that comparison yet, but I'm ahead of you because it's so obvious where you're going with this. So let's forge ahead.
I'm sure you'll make a point eventually.
This is how Newton's first law describes the principle of equilibrium. Objects at rest stay at rest until acted upon by an unbalanced force. That's a little wordy, but it describes the behavior of objects in equilibrium.
That's not wordy. It's literally one sentence, and a short one at that. It was 13 words long. This sentence, explaining the shortness of that sentence, is literally longer than it was. Nor is it even slightly difficult or tricky to understand. This is basic physics from Isaac Newton. A body in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted on by an outside force. And yes, the same holds true with a body at rest, that it tends to stay at rest until acted upon by an outside force. But given the constant motion of everything in the universe, there's nothing that is ever truly at rest. Only at rest, again, in relation to a particular reference frame or point of view. And I still know exactly where you're going with this, Jeremy, so let's go ahead and get ourselves there.
Imagine the entire physical universe inside this circle. All matter, energy, light, space, and even time inside this circle. Inside the physical universe. Outside, nothing. Not even empty space. In the beginning, the physical universe was nothing. An equilibrium of nothing.
I'm going to stop you right there.
Ahem. The Big Bang was not the explosion of the universe out of nothing. It is the expansion of the current presentation of our universe from an initial state of high density and temperature. You cannot say that in the beginning the universe was nothing. It wasn't. It was, frankly, everything. It was what's called a singularity. What's a singularity? Well, I'm glad you asked. To understand what a singularity is, imagine the force of gravity compressing you down into an infinitely tiny point, so that you occupy literally no volume. That sounds impossible, and it is. These singularities are found in the centers of black holes and at the beginning of the Big Bang. These singularities don't represent something physical. Rather, when they appear in mathematics, they are telling us that our theories of physics are breaking down, and we need to replace them with a better understanding. So, the singularity of the initial state of the universe was a state of near infinite density and infinite heat, or basically massive energy all coalesced into a single point. So powerful, so intense, that our understanding of physics cannot account for it. Now, this is important for a number of reasons. For one, since we're talking all about movement in this video, and physics is concerned with motion and interactions between matter and energy, to say that singularities cause our understanding of physics to break down kind of means you can't use laws of physics, such as Newton's laws of motion, in order to explain them. Secondly, with all of that energy coalesced into a singularity, it was absolutely not in a state of equilibrium. I mean, after all, energy fuels movement. And with that much energy, to think that it was ever just flat, motionless, equilibrium, nothing happening, nothing going on at all, well,
That's dumb. You're dumb.
And it would have stayed that way unless something outside of the physical universe entered the circle.
Wait a minute, hold it.
Jeremy, didn't you just say that there was nothing outside of the circle? Nothing outside of the universe? Rewind the tape, please.
Inside the physical universe. Outside, nothing. Not even empty space.
So, which is it, Jeremy? If there was nothing outside of the universe, nothing outside of that circle, then there could certainly not be something from outside the universe that could come into the universe. If you're saying that something outside the universe existed to begin with, then you're undermining your initial premise that insists that there was nothing outside the physical universe at all. But that little contradiction aside, you're still wrong. Because nothing needed to come into the circle, come into the physical universe in order to set anything in motion. All that would be necessary would be for the initial hot, dense state of the universe to be in a state where it makes a natural change from one state to another, such as that hot, dense state being unsustainable as it was, and it naturally expanding and inflating into the physical universe.
But it did not stay this way. Something non-physical, outside of the physical universe, had to have existed to bring the physical universe into existence.
So, again, no, it doesn't have to be that way. There's no reason to think that the initial expansion of the universe wasn't a wholly natural occurrence fueled by the massive energy of the initial state. But you then insist on not only it being caused by something outside the universe, when you had previously told us that there was nothing outside the universe, but you also insist on that thing being something non-physical. And frankly, that's a weasel word, non-physical. Sure, it sounds good, kind of science-y, but it's pretty much meaningless. I mean, you don't tell us anything about what something is by telling us what it's not. Hey, have you ever heard of a Flutenragnifier? No, what's that? Well, it's not a cat, I can tell you that much. Well, that's great, but that doesn't tell me what it actually is. So if a Flutenragnifier turns out to be another word for a white dwarf star, telling me that it isn't a cat does absolutely nothing for my understanding of the thing. So if this thing that came into the universe from outside the universe, where there was nothing to even exist that could come into the universe, well, if it's non-physical, then what is it? Is it energy? Well, no, because energy is physical. Is it spatial? Does it have height, width, and depth? No, couldn't be, because spatial is physical. What is it? Mental? Well, mental things are specifically things produced by brains, which are physical, and there has never been any indication that anything mental can exist absent a brain to produce it. So then, what is it, Jeremy? What is this non-physical thing, if it's non-physical? Is it magic? Well, you'd first need to prove that magic exists. And anyway, why does this thing have to be non-physical in the first place? Why the insistence on that? I mean, since we're just kind of making shit up based on nothing at this point, I can easily imagine something like an advanced race from an alternate universe, which is entirely physical, advancing their technology until they could create a pocket universe by utilizing their entirely physical technological abilities. And we are that pocket universe. incapable of examining or exploring beyond the bounds of our own universe. But I'm not going to insist that that's what's going on, because I have no reason to think that that's what's going on. And I don't assert things based on wild speculation and absent sufficient reason to assert it. You might want to think about trying that for yourself.
So what do we know about the being that created the physical universe?
What the fuck?
Whoa! And now we've hop, skipped, and jumped to it being a being? When did that happen? All you've attempted to establish thus far was that it was some kind of non-physical thing from outside of the universe coming into the universe and starting everything moving. When did you even attempt to establish this thing as a being? Being described in this case as a thinking agent or entity with will and desire. Up till now, your non-physical, coming from outside the universe from whence nothing comes, could have been a force or a natural occurrence, devoid of things like will or intelligence or desire. But without even attempting to argue for those things, you're just going to assume them a priori and move ahead as if they've been clearly established?
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Here are 6 things that we know about that being. The first one is obvious. He's non-physical. To be outside of the physical universe, he has to be non-physical.
Unproven assumption based on an unproven assertion that only a single physical existence is even possible, and anything from outside this universe must be something other than physical. This ignores any possibility of a multiverse, or higher physical dimensions like 4th or 5th or higher dimensional beings existing entirely physically, but just among higher dimensions than we 3-dimensional beings can access.
And the 3-dimensional creature sees an attractive, congenial-looking square, watches it enter its house, and decides in a gesture of interdimensional amity to say hello. "Hello," says the 3-dimensional creature. "How are you? I am a visitor from the 3rd dimension." Well, the poor square looks around his closed house, sees no one there, and what's more, has witnessed a greeting coming from his insides, a voice from within.
Or just the possibility of other physical universes outside the bounds of our own. Basically, Jeremy, if you want to assert something from outside our universe must be non-physical, you need to prove that with something other than, because it has to be.
Another word for that is spiritual.
Oh, so we do get you to give us a term for what you think this non-physical thing is. It's spiritual. Okay, well, now prove that spirits actually exist. Go ahead, I'll wait. Oh, that's right. You don't seem to be in the habit of proving any of your assertions.
And for this spiritual, non-physical being to create the universe, he had to be powerful.
How come? I mean, we saw from your earlier little display with the blocks that a single small movement can cause a chain reaction that results in effects much greater than the initial movement that started it all. A tiny push of a marble resulted in the entire system moving and changing and collapsing and altering its composition. A spark can produce an explosion if the conditions are right. A butterfly flapping its wings can cause a hurricane on the other side of the planet. This notion that an initial causal event must be more powerful than the effect that it produces is just nonsensical. And frankly, it's something I have only ever heard from apologists trying to establish an idea of an omnipotent creator and just asserting that in order to start the movement of the universe, that creator must have had unlimited power. But that's based on nothing. Any first grader understands that the power of effects can greatly exceed the power of a cause.
And had the ability to act.
That's largely meaningless, because everything has the ability to act so long as it interacts with the things around it. Think of a tiny rock floating in space. It's not doing anything on its own. It can't think. It can't move under its own power. But it has the ability to act. Like it floats near enough to a larger celestial body such that gravity pulls it in a particular direction. That movement eventually brings it into the proximity of Earth, which with its own gravity increases the velocity of the rock. Its trajectory puts it on a collision course with a satellite in just the exact right shot that it hits and damages a crucial sensor on that satellite, resulting in it needing repair to continue to function. That rock, unable to move itself, with no intentionality, no will, no thought, and yet it had the ability to act on that satellite, causing damage that may cost the millions of dollars in lost data or repair efforts. No, what you really mean isn't ability to act, but instead you mean will and self-determination to act under its own power and influence. Which again is something that you haven't proven or even really argued for. I mean, why couldn't a naturally occurring spatial distortion have originated in another universe and then bumped up against the initial hot, dense singularity of our universe, resulting in it expanding into the space-time that we inhabit? Do I have any real reason to think that's what happened? Well, I have exactly the same amount of reason to assert that as you do to assert your concept of a spiritual, powerful creator being. Which is to say, none whatsoever.
And if this powerful being was ever going to act, he had to be motivated.
This is really just an extension of the last one. Motivated to act goes hand in hand with what you were really asserting with your third claim, which was will and self-determination to act under its own power and influence.
And this motivated being, if he was ever going to create the universe and the world around us, he had to have some level of intelligence and imagination.
Neither intelligence nor imagination is required for the universe to become what it did. Everything that has happened in our universe since the initial Big Bang expansion has been directly in line with the fundamental forces of the universe. With the expansion of space-time and the energy expanding out making it less intense, the universe cooled enough for electrons to combine with nuclei to form neutral atoms of hydrogen and helium. Gravity caused slight overdensities of matter to collapse, forming the first stars. These stars then grouped together to form the first galaxies. The radiation from the first stars and quasars reionized the neutral hydrogen of the universe. Galaxies continue to form, evolve, merge, and cluster together, creating the large-scale structure we observe today, including planets like ours that also formed from natural processes and had the correct combination of elements and materials to make it favorable for life as we know it. That life then also arose from likely natural processes, and evolution and natural selection took over and eventually yielded us and the world around us. No intelligence or imagination was required for any of this, because this is exactly what would have happened as a result of the natural, unguided, unintended forces of the universe. Literally nothing we have ever experienced or deduced from evidence contradicts what we would expect to find. Even if your spiritual, powerful, able to act, motivated being originating from outside the universe from which nothing originates did exist and started everything moving, it could have just sat back at that point and did nothing else. Much like you just tapped the first marble with your finger and stepped back and watched what would happen on its own. Your God being could have tapped the initial singularity and then did nothing else. That requires neither intelligence nor imagination. So even though this entire argument is just supposed to be about a first cause or prime mover, you're now jumping past that to a full-on intelligent designer who willfully and intentionally creates and directs everything that ever happened and will ever happen forever and ever. Yet again, more aspects that you haven't made a sufficient case for. In fact, you haven't even attempted to argue for that in any way, but instead you're just blindly asserting it based on nothing.
I wish I could say I was surprised.
So that was Jeremy's attempt to prove the existence of a creator god through an engineering display of a set of dominoes and a bunch of bald assertions about a plethora of things he hadn't established. So yeah, in case you didn't see it coming during the first 30 seconds of his video, Jeremy was attempting to make the prime mover argument. An argument that's been consistently debunked by the very science he was attempting to use to establish it, physics. Modern physics, particularly quantum mechanics, describes a universe where change and activity are inherent at the fundamental level. For example, virtual particles constantly pop in and out of existence in a vacuum, and quantum states evolve over time even without an external mover in the classical sense. This suggests that the initial premise that everything that changes needs an external mover might not universally be true at the most fundamental levels of reality as we currently understand them. But Jeremy was even worse off than just leaning on a long debunked apologetic argument, because he couldn't even stick to it. He meandered into low-bar Bill Craig's Kalam cosmological argument, which winds up asserting a variety of traits to this prime mover that absolutely do not follow from the argument itself, and end up as just unproven assertions based on nothing other than the apologist's desire for the thing that they are arguing for having these traits, because they really, really want their God to be real.
When you do a conceptual analysis of what it is to be a cause of the universe, you arrive at a being which is an uncaused, beginningless, timeless, spaceless, enormously powerful, personal creator of the universe.
Why don't you back it up with a source? My source is that I made it the fuck up.
But nowhere in any evidence-based concept of an initial cause to the movement of the universe is there any reason to surmise that that cause is spiritual, powerful, motivated, intelligent, or imaginative. These traits are nothing more than a theist starting with their conclusion, their religiously imposed idea of God, and then working backwards to try to establish that being through argumentation. But they always seem to lose interest in, or capability of engaging in, rational argumentation, and so instead of actually attempting to argue logically for those traits, they just devolve into asserting them without explanation, as if it just must be the case that their prime mover has to have these traits, because they say so. And they say so because their religion says so. And trying to actually establish any of these traits is just, it's really hard, guys. Come on, why can't you just believe me and accept the thing that I believe without evidence? But in the end, Jeremy established absolutely nothing in this video. Not just when it came to the aspects of his creator being that he didn't even bother to argue for, but also the rationality of a prime mover in the first place. Put simply, the universe does not need something from outside itself to start off everything. And no amount of knocking down some dominoes is going to ever come close to proving that Christianity is real, or that you even have the first clue in how to argue for it. And so that is where we'll end things for today. So thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe so you'll always be notified when a new video comes out. Check me out on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Patreon if you'd like to support my work directly. My Teespring if you want some Plinky merchandise. All that link below in the description. Special shout out to my most recent super thankers here on YouTube, Salvi Mike, Autumnal Fling, Pavel B, and Just Joe Bell. And with that said, until next time, I'm Professor Plink, reminding you to keep striving for greater understanding. It's the best way to get wherever you want to go.